Hello, this is Chris Browder, and this is video 4.3 in a series on second language acquisition. Uh, we're going to be talking about anxiety in second language acquisition. So, we started lesson 4 by acknowledging that certain factors involved with success in second language acquisition were out of the learner's control. Those factors included age and aptitude. We also acknowledged, however, that some learners seem to be overcoming these factors because of their effort. So we realized that clearly motivation is also a very important factor to consider. In SLA, we refer to all these factors as individual or personal variables. These are individual differences between learners that explain why some learners are more successful than others. In this video, we will discuss anxiety because anxiety appears to be another variable that explains why some learners are more successful than others. This video is largely based on 3 texts. The first of those is Rod Ellis's text, Understanding Second Language Acquisition. Then comes Gass, Benny, and Plonsky's text, Second Language Acquisition, an Introductory Course. And Lightbound and Spada's How Languages Are Learned. Thank you to them and give credit to them for all their hard work. Thank you. Well, so core question. Why study anxiety in SLA? Who cares? Well, as we discussed, anxiety is a personal factor that significantly influences language learning in much the same way age, aptitude, and motivation do. It helps explain why some learners are more successful than others. So, if this is something that we can control or ameliorate, we can help learners to be more successful. What is anxiety? This is an important question to ask because it's not always a bad thing. Anxiety is a natural and normal response to anticipated situations that require a heightened level of attention and a faster response time. It is both a physiological and psychological temporary change to prepare oneself for a challenge. The anticipation and its corresponding anxiety is based on our past experiences with similar situations. So, past experience past success with a challenge, for example, can increase our confidence and thereby reduce our anxiety with similar experiences and challenges in the future. Similarly, past failures or pain can increase our anxiety with similar experiences in the future. So, thus, anxiety is often specific to a certain task or situation. So, while there is something called a trait anxiety or a general anxiety that somebody just seems to have, some people seem to have that problem all the time with everything. There's also task specific anxiety or contextualized anxiety, where somebody might have anxiety with one specific thing. So, in this case, we're talking about anxiety that's specific to language learning situations. And by the way, it can be even more specific than that. You might develop an anxiety that's just very specific to language tests or spontaneous speaking in a second language. Should we always try to reduce anxiety? Well, no, not really. It's not that simple. To answer this question, we need to discuss both enabling and disabling anxiety. So, well, let's start with enabling anxiety. Small amounts of anxiety can be healthy. It keeps people alert and stimulated. It causes them to plan, it causes them to prepare, it causes them to reflect, and it causes them to analyze. Some SLA researchers have referred to this healthy level of anxiety and enabling anxiety as tension. Disabling anxiety, in contrast, is a problem. Large amounts of anxiety can interfere with second language learning and performance, much like a learning disability does. Anxiety has a very strong negative impact on language performance. Anxiety also interferes with language processing, as I said, much like a learning disability. So it might be interfering with somebody's ability to correctly use grammar, pronunciation, syntax, listening comprehension, etc. Moreover, and this might be the most dangerous part of all, people may simply choose to avoid something that causes them too much anxiety, and they might not be polite about it. They could become rude or disruptive or confrontational. So keep that in mind. You're dealing with difficult students. The actual problem might be simply that they're trying to avoid something in your lesson that causes them anxiety, and being disruptive is one way to do it. What causes anxiety in SLA? Well, it's important to point out that something that might cause anxiety for one learner might not cause anxiety for another. So, again, it's just not that simple. But researchers have identified several common sources of anxiety in language learning and language learning classrooms and situations. The first of these is comparing oneself to others and feeling that you are not good enough. Competition, as you know, can be very motivating. But if we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, and always, of course, finding people who are better than us, then we will never feel good enough. And we could end up in a situation where we're basically constantly beating ourselves up. Um, if you're constantly ruminating over the fact that you're never good enough, then that can become painful after a while. In language learning situations, spontaneous or unplanned communication can cause some people a lot of anxiety. And this is logical and rational, by the way, because, of course, people are afraid of making embarrassing mistakes, and spontaneous speaking involves a lot of risk for this. When you are speaking in a foreign language, you're really putting yourself out there. You make a mistake, somebody's going to laugh at you. People might think that you're stupid. And that's a threat to our ego and our self esteem. And we, of course, want to protect ourselves from that. And that's when the anxiety comes. Similarly, people are also afraid of being negatively evaluated or judged inferior. This is a common problem for language testing in classrooms, but it also intersects with race, class, gender, and stereotypes. People often get disabling anxiety when put into situations where they might be afraid of confirming a negative stereotype somebody has about them. So, Hispanic Americans, for instance, might find English language testing threatening for this reason. If they've spent, most of their life or all of their life in the United States, they want to believe that they're just the same as everybody else. Then when you say, well, we're going to give you this test to see if you're an English learner or not, yeah, that could be very threatening to their identity as Americans. And if it's threatening enough, causes them enough anxiety, that could actually be disabling. And, it's a self fulfilling prophecy. They end up failing the test and confirming other people's negative stereotypes about Hispanics just not learning English. So by now, you should be realizing that anxiety isn't just like a character trait. It's not something static. It's a dynamic process in much the same way motivation is. So you can't blame somebody or credit somebody for having it or not having it. It might not really be something in their control. It might be the result of circumstances. So we know, for example, that poor performance and achievement is both a cause and an effect of anxiety. Bad experiences with the learning and use of a target language can create future anxiety, and past failures cause increased fear of future failures, which causes debilitating anxiety, which leads to more future failures. In other words, a downward spiral. So, what can teachers do about it exactly? Well, I mean, now that you realize that some students are caught up in a downward spiral, you want to do whatever you can do to catch that, or at least not make it worse. And if it's possible for you to design lessons and activities that lift students up and pull them out of that downward spiral, then more power to you. So, to start off with, for everybody, people who don't have this negative anxiety and people who have this negative anxiety, teachers need to design lessons and learning activities that give most students a reasonable amount of enabling tension to keep them alert and excited. So you don't want to avoid all things that might cause anybody an anxiety, because otherwise the class is going to be boring or just not engaging, right? But teachers need to be very careful about designing activities and interactions in such a way that the students can confront their anxieties and overcome them gradually. For instance, speaking in front of a class can be very anxiety provoking. But if you allow people to maybe plan out what they're going to say, maybe use some note cards, practice for a little while, then they're going to be a little bit more confident. And if you allow them to speak to a partner or a small group first, that might be a safer way for them to practice and build confidence until they're ready for the full group. Teachers should build learners' confidence by helping them experience success as often as possible and not putting them in situations where they will experience repeated failure and humiliation. Teachers can also be flexible and allow students to practice or demonstrate their learning in a way that they're comfortable doing until they have built enough confidence to try the other way that causes the most anxiety. And most of all, teachers should understand that students may not be able to simply suck it up and overcome their anxiety. We cannot punish students for something that's simply beyond their control. Sometimes people cannot control their anxiety. So we must be prepared to accommodate students for their anxiety by differentiation of instruction and assessment in much the way we would accommodate somebody with a learning disability. All right. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful and enjoyable for you.